Welcome to the Weird Learning Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Tracy Dix and Dr. Alex Patel. Today's episode, Curious About Clearing, or Get Clear on Clearing, with special guest, Dr. Catherine Armstrong.
Hello, my name's Alex Patel from Weird Learning, and I'm here with my colleague Tracy Dix.
Hello, everyone. We're very excited today because we have a special guest, Dr. Catherine Armstrong from Loughborough University. Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Alex. Hello, Tracy. Really nice to meet you both and talk with your guests today. My name's Catherine and I'm a historian. I'm based at Loughborough University, as you've said, and my specialist area of research is slavery in the United States. But as well as my research, I also teach undergraduates and postgraduates, and I've also held positions at the university that mean that I've had lots of experience of clearing. And so one of those roles has been admissions tutor. And as admissions tutor, I've been part of the team that answers the phones on clearing day and speaks to people who are hoping to come to Loughborough as students. And so over the years, I've gained lots and lots of experience of the sorts of questions and concerns that potential students have on what can be a really exciting day, but can also be a really stressful day too.
Brilliant, because yes, we're aware that a lot of students now are very concerned about what will happen on clearing day, because obviously few people have gone through this before.
Yeah, so hopefully many of you who are listening will find this episode particularly helpful today. So shall we start?
Yes.
So having worked at a number of universities now, Catherine, could you give our listeners a summary of what clearing is like as a process at the departments you have worked at and are based in now? From the university's point of view, what do they hope to get out of the process?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think it should be really useful to your listeners to understand what drives universities on clearing day, because then they can get the best out of the process too. So for me, the departments that I've been based in have got one main concern on clearing day, which is to get as many high quality students as possible. And universities often define high quality students based on A-level grades. And I'm not very happy about that, because I think we all know that your A-level results don't really reflect how you are as a scholar, how you are as a student. They are just one among many metrics that will measure your academic achievement. But nevertheless, for universities at clearing, that is something that's really important.
Okay, can I just ask, so how much control do individual admissions tutors actually have if they speak to a candidate who sounds absolutely brilliant on the phone and they've got all these wonderful extracurricular activities to their name, but their grades for some reason are quite low, they've perhaps not performed very well?
Unfortunately, very little. I think there's a bit of a misconception that you can ring up and try and sell yourself, as it were, on clearing day and perhaps get into an institution that wasn't previously looking for someone with your grades. And unfortunately, that's not really been my experience. What tends to happen is that universities actually get to see your A-level grades before you do. And so a few days in advance of results day, universities find out what your results have been and then can start making the decisions and processing the results in advance of you knowing them. And so by the time we get to results day, decisions have already been made about how many extra spaces a particular course might have. So consequently, this means that decisions will also have been made about the A-level grades that will be accepted through clearing. And so, for example, if a university is nearly full and has only a handful of spaces left, it might still go into clearing, but ask for 3 A's or even higher.
So they might increase.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. And that's been my experience at Loughborough over the last few years, actually. And other universities might find, for whatever reason, particular degree programs are looking a little bit quiet. There are still quite a lot of spaces, in which case they might be willing to accept students on lower grades than those that they were originally advertising for.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'm going to bring up a bit of my past, as I like to do in these
Okay,
discussions.
I think I might as well, and then we can see where it goes.
Why not? So I applied to do psychology, and as a backup, psychology and neuroscience at the University of Manchester. Psychology on its own required, I think, an A and two Bs or something like that. But the joint honours required, I think, two Bs and a C, which was very strange because a lot of people then told me that the joint honours is more work. So yeah, just an interesting situation to be in.
Yeah, that is really interesting, and actually quite common in the universities that I've worked in too, that joint honours, although, you have to try and get to grips with a number of different methodologies, sometimes different theoretical frameworks, do sometimes require lower grades. And what we've found as well is that employers actually respect joint honours degrees. There's no sense that, oh, single honours is a kind of gold standard degree. If you're interested in studying a combination of several different subjects, it is worth looking at the joint honours offerings.
Well, I would recommend it. Initially, I wanted to go into psychology, then realised I didn't like psychology, so it gave me an avenue to go into neuroscience and then biological sciences.
So sometimes you can get quite creative about the pathways that you choose at university once you're there.
Absolutely. And I think that's something to tell your listeners as well, that if they accept a place through clearing or indeed through the standard UCAS route, they arrive at university and the first few weeks they think, oh, perhaps I've made a bit of a mistake here. Maybe I should think about changing to a different discipline, a different subject area. That is possible. Don't think that once you've accepted that place in clearing or through UCAS that's it. You're stuck with it for 3 years and you can't change. It's always worth talking to the admissions tutor or the program leader in your degree subject area just to see what might be possible.
Yeah, is there a deadline for when somebody has to decide to change course?
At my own university at Loughborough, it's within the first 4 weeks, I believe.
Okay.
So you do have a little bit of time to go to a lecture, go to a seminar, see what the discipline is about. But if you know pretty quickly you might have made a mistake, it's possible to change.
That's really comforting and useful to know.
So here's when I'm going to bring in something from my past that goes against what Catherine has said.
Oh, we like controversy.
So I know we like controversy, and let's see how it goes. Back in 1998, as an international student, I performed abysmally for my A-levels. I got 2 C's and a D, and the D was for English literature, which was the course that I was looking to do at university. And, like many other students, I went around all these universities exhibitions, and the ones for Australia were kind of welcoming me with open arms and saying, yes, that's a great grade. You've done so well. Come to us, apply. And then, I went to the one for the UK, and it was quite a mixed bag. And at most of the stands, the kind of admissions tutors tended to be for subjects like law and engineering, which I guess, are the ones that are most popular with international students. And they tended to be really surprised when I approached them. I was like, I want to study English literature, please. What are my chances? And so many of them were not in the position to make any decisions on admissions because it wasn't their school or department. And as it happens, I approached the stand for Loughborough University, and the admissions tutor for English happened to be there. He was very active in recruiting overseas. So we had a chat, and he kind of led me away to an interview space, and we had a chat about Hamlet. And I think he decided on there and then that I knew what I was talking about and offered me a place, which was great. And so I scored 2 C's and a D at A-levels. And at the time, I believe Loughborough's entry requirements were something like 2 A's and a B, or 2 B's and an A. Either way, it was still several grades above what I had. And in fact, I had a classmate from school at the time who was also kind of doing the rounds, checking out universities, and she'd had a C, a D, and an E, I think, lower grades than I had. and she was offered a place as well based on interview. So, I mean, I don't know if this means that procedures have changed, or perhaps, said admissions tutor might have bent the rules a little bit more than he should have done. But I mean, also, I was quite shell-shocked because I don't feel like I was ready to sell myself. I was just there to explore. So it was an interesting experience. And I guess, what would I say about it? Miracles, exceptions can happen. But of course, we wouldn't take them as a guarantee.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what we can say is that sometimes it's worth trying, but don't get disheartened if, somebody looks at your grades, despite you saying, oh, well, I've done this and this and this, and they say, oh, actually, no.
Yeah.
It might just be that they're very strict at that particular institution. So don't get disheartened.
If I could just come in there, I think that's a fantastic story, Tracy.
I think we're
And
gonna have a fight now.
I think that in some ways your experience, I don't think would happen now, just simply because there would be too much of a gap between your A-level grades and the required grades for the course. Having said that, though, regularly at Loughborough, what happens is, say, for example, we're advertising a course at an A and 2 Bs. We will take an applicant who has 3 Bs, maybe even BBC on some occasions if they have special circumstances that we're willing to consider. And the reason why universities do this is because they're essentially taking a gamble, saying that a student that has applied to Loughborough and really wants to go to Loughborough, even though they haven't quite achieved academically what we'd like to see on paper, will still be a more engaged and dedicated student who will perform really well and will be able to help them to perform really well than somebody who perhaps has got 3 A's but never even thought of Loughborough before results day. And so for those applicants who put Loughborough down as their first or even second choice, but just miss their grades, don't immediately assume it's going to be a no.
Yeah.
Have a look on UCAS Track. You might be pleasantly surprised and find actually we've offered you a place, even though you didn't make the grades. The only other thing I wanted to pick up there, Tracy, is that international students are a whole different world in terms of admissions. And I won't go into a lot of complicated detail about the reasons why here, but just so that your listeners understand, at Loughborough, every degree course has a quota of students that we call home students from the UK, but then another quota of students that are international from the EU and from the wider world. And so sometimes if we've had a special difficulty filling our international quota, we actually make different types of offers for international students. And so it may be the case that if you're coming to a UK institution from outside of the UK, that you find that your application is treated slightly differently to the way that your home student friends are treated. And that's simply because for admissions purposes, we have different numbers that we're trying to work to on results day, because our goal as universities and admissions tutors is to get to as near to full as possible without tipping over to be too full, because that looks really bad when, for example, you've probably seen it in the press when universities say, we haven't got enough accommodation, we haven't got big enough classrooms to teach all our
Sadly, I have
students.
heard of that happening at places.
Students getting stuck without accommodation sometimes.
Well, or being expected to sit on the stairs of a lecture theatre. The rationale is that, well, after a while, not everyone will come, there'll be spaces then.
Okay, so since we've covered the sort of university perspective of what their goals are during clearing, Shall we go to Alex's question, which was about what would the clearing process look like from a student's perspective?
Yeah, so the way I understand things is through kind of imagining what it would be like, almost like a timeline. What would a student expect it to look like when they, pick up the phone, or rather, what would it sound like, I guess is more appropriate.
Sure, yeah. So what you would have when you ring the clearing hotline at Loughborough or similar universities is you initially get put through to what is in effect a call centre, which is staffed by often administrators and sometimes students and former students of Loughborough. So people that know the institution pretty well, but they don't necessarily know the degree programme that you'll be ringing up and talking about. And so initially they'll investigate your query. And so if you're ringing, for example, to ask, I have 3 A's, I'm interested in coming to Loughborough to study single honours history, can I do so? Will you give me a place? Then the initial person that answers your call will check whether we have places left to see whether that particular programme is still in clearing. If it is not, they may give you the option of alternative programmes, like the joint honours ones we were discussing a moment ago, that you might be interested in. If there are places, then they will go through the process of asking you whether you'd like to have a formal offer of a clearing place. Don't worry about that. At that point, you're not committed to anything. If you say, yes, please do take my details, have your UCAS number handy. That's a really good tip. And we'll be able to call up your applications on UCAS and we'll be able to make you a clearing offer. As I say, not committing you to anything. You've got time to reflect, to speak to your parents, your family, to speak to your school, if any of those things are appropriate for you, and actually make a decision that's right for you. And indeed, although, of course, we hope that every student would want to come to Loughborough, nothing is stopping you applying or phoning a number of institutions on clearing day. Please don't feel that you've just got to pick one and speak to one. What will then happen is that if you have more questions, perhaps, about the accommodation that the university offers, about what the campus is like, because it may be that you've never been to Loughborough before in your life, then you will get directed by that initial call centre team to someone who can help you with that in more detail. And where someone like me comes in on clearing day is that I very often speak to people who want to know a little bit more about what the course is like. So you've probably applied for history at very different universities, for example, but you know what their history degree programs look like. And that was a good indicator, good reason why you chose those universities, because you thought the degrees sounded super exciting. So you may never have really thought, well, what sort of history do they do at Loughborough? And to be able to make your decision about whether you want to spend 3 or 4 years at Loughborough, you need an answer to that question. And so in that case, you'd get put through to me or someone like me on the phone, and I'd be able to talk you through the sort of history we do. For example, we don't do ancient or medieval history. So if those are your areas, then unfortunately, I probably would say history at Loughborough isn't for you, and I'd be honest, and I'd give you that honest advice.
Do you find people ask about different teaching techniques, whether it's like group work or?
Absolutely, yeah, that is a big question that we get asked. And so I would then talk through the amount of teaching that would be in lecture or big group format, the amount of teaching in small groups or individual tutorials. We also get asked very often about the way that students' learning and development is assessed. So is it all essay writing, for example? Do I have to do exams? What do those exams look like? Would they be online, or would they be in a big exam hall, for example? And of course, thinking about online learning as well, that we also have in the last few years got asked a lot about, will my learning be in person? Is it expected that I'm on campus in the classroom, or will I be learning remotely? And so Those sorts of questions are precisely the kind of thing that you should be asking on A-level results day if you make that clearing call.
That's really helpful.
Mhm.
Have we got another question, Tracy?
Yes, so I guess you've probably answered some of this already, but Catherine, when you were talking about how you disagree that admissions is based purely on A-level results, are the only questions that you tend to get from students ones about the course, or do you sometimes get triaged to, students who are really keen, but, whoever they've been speaking to at the call center is unable to make a decision?
Absolutely, yeah. So sometimes I answer queries from students who might have slightly unusual qualifications. And by that, I mean things like BTECs, for example, perhaps the IB as well. Certainly in our international student community, there are qualifications that many of us are not familiar with at all, and so have to go away and research the equivalents to A-level, because of course, everyone you'll speak to on clearing day knows, oh yes, for history, you need an A and two Bs, but that is a very particular type of qualification. You may have done something different. I do also sometimes speak to potential students or their parents or their teachers who haven't made the required grades, either if they applied to us during the regular round of UCAS, or they haven't made the required grades for clearing. And I think this is where I would just clarify the situation that Trace was mentioning earlier. Yes, it definitely is the case that if you miss your grades, you may still get made an offer. But if you don't get made an offer and you are sadly rejected from your first choice institution, then there's really no point ringing them up on clearing day and asking whether your case could be considered afresh. Even if the institution has clearing places for that degree programme, if you've been rejected from that programme, you're not going to be given a place in clearing, unfortunately. And your time on A-level results day is far better spent thinking about plans B, C, and D, all of which can be really rewarding and really fruitful if you open your mind to them. Please don't think just because you've got a rejection from your first choice institution that you're some sort of failure or that it's the end of your life. I know it can feel that way. It can be devastating. I appreciate that. But actually, there's always an alternative out there. There'll be clearing places for you that do match the grades that you have, that are fantastic institutions in lovely parts of the world. So please do open your mind to those. But I must just say there is no point really trying to ring the institution that's rejected you and ask for reconsideration.
And that's because universities have already received each student's grades, and they've thought about how many students are going to be accepted onto the course and whether they're going to adjust the boundaries at all. So they've already looked at the student's circumstances and made their decision. So as you're saying, it's better to kind of look at an institution which doesn't have your information and contact them.
Absolutely right. The only exception to what you've just said is that if any really quite serious mitigating circumstances have come to light for you as the student since you put in your application to UCAS. So just to give an example, you've suffered a bereavement of a very, very close family member immediately before you sat an exam, for example. That is the sort of seriousness of circumstance that we would consider and listen to and make a judgment about on the day. There is also, of course, the route of appealing your A-level grades. That's something at the university and as admissions tutors, we don't get involved in at all. If you go to your school and college and decide with your tutors that you'd like to go down the appeal route, they will guide you through that. And then at that stage, when you get the results of your appeal, if we still have clearing places left, please do come back to us with your new A-level grades that match what we're looking for. And then, of course, we will probably give you a place based on those new grades. I appreciate that because a lot of the horse trading, if I can call it that, negotiating happens on A-level results day itself. You might think, oh, but if I put in an appeal, I'll lose the opportunity to go to my institution of choice. To be honest with you, that could well happen. In my experience, the degree programs I look after often close in clearing after a day or 2 days. They simply become full and we're not looking for any more students. So consequently, if you do decide to pursue an appeal with your school, please do, as I said earlier, think about other institutions, other possible places to go, or even think about a year out, possibly. University immediately, straight after school, is not your only option. But these are the sorts of things you need to talk through with people who know you very well and would help you to understand what might be an option for you.
I think what you talked about so far is very interesting, because I think the belief with clearing very often is it's a time when things kind of shuffle around and nothing is predetermined and there's a lot of flexibility. But what you're saying is everything has already been decided before the A-level results have been received. So I think, and I hope, that students who are listening in will find that really, really interesting in terms of how they can use the clearing process to find the best option for themselves. Okay, so maybe something a bit more fun then. Can you tell us about some of your more memorable clearing calls?
I can, and I think on a really positive level, just being able to say to a young person, yes, we will offer you a place. Let me take your details now. You're coming to Loughborough. And just for some of them, hearing the joy in their voices and relief sometimes too. It's really thrilling. It really makes the job worthwhile. And it is a sort of stressful, high pressure time for young people who are waiting for their results. So to be able to put a smile on someone's face and hear that, oh, now I can, it's a weight off my shoulders. I can put the phone down and go out and celebrate with friends. And, you can just, that joy is infectious. It's wonderful. So I've had, over the years, had a number of those that just really put a smile on your face and a spring in your step. But on the other hand, of course, we do tend to get some more challenging calls, and the difficult ones do tend to stick in the mind as well as the joyful ones. So it's a real roller coaster for admissions tutors and people manning clearing phones on A-level results day. And because we know that it's a really stressful and difficult time, a pivotal point in the moment of young people and of their parents and family members, we do understand that sometimes the challenging phone calls we get, sometimes even assertive and aggressive phone calls that we get, are not coming from a place of nastiness. It really just is the heat of the moment. But my advice there would be is, if someone tells you it's a no, then please do accept that.
Don't shout at them.
No, don't
offer them
shout.
bribes.
Don't beg, don't offer bribes. Absolutely, yes.
Don't refuse to put the phone down.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and I think, your message about the stress and being open to other opportunities is a really important one, isn't it? Because I think in times of high pressure, and we've all been there, and I'm sure we can all empathize as well, it can be really difficult to see the wood for the trees. And it is a huge cliche, but when one door closes, another one does open. And like I've mentioned before, even though it kind of goes against what Catherine has been saying all this while, but I did not expect to get my place at Loughborough, and I was kind of going around all the local universities in Singapore back then, and the admissions tutors there were saying, it's a definite no from us. And I remember my mum saying, oh, that's not very encouraging. And, I remember one chap saying, well, do you want me to be honest? Or what's the point in kind of stringing you along kind of thing? And on hindsight, it was a difficult message to take at the time, but he was absolutely right. There is no point. And if it's a clear no, it's a clear no. Look at other options. And
But there are lots of those out there, aren't there?
There are lots of those out there. And you will, you'll probably find that your life takes a direction that you didn't expect in many wonderful ways.
Absolutely. And another tip for A-level results day, give yourself that time to make that decision. Don't rush into something because you think, oh, I've got to take the first offer that's made, or I've got to go to a university. I've really got to sort of rush into this before I lose the opportunity. It really isn't like that. You do have time to speak to other people, to get their opinion. You do have time to think and to sleep on it. When we make you a clearing offer, that offer stands for 3 days, and we're not going to withdraw that. You have that time to think about it. You don't have to give us a yes or no on the phone. So if you do ring a university and someone seems to suggest, oh, I definitely want a decision now, actually that's not right. You do have that almost cooling off period, as you might call it.
That's very
time to
helpful
think
too.
about
And so
it.
that's 3 days for all the universities. That's a standard.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
It's certainly something that we've used in Loughborough for the whole time that I've been working there. And I believe it's a cross university standard.
But it's probably something that people could research very quickly on Google.
Absolutely.
So, so you'll know in advance.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this earlier before we started recording, but if a student has better than expected grades or wants to change course, should they gamble and decline any existing offers so they can go through clearing? I think there's some misconceptions about this, so it might be worth covering.
Yeah, so I find this really quite interesting, but also scary, because I'd heard that if you want to go into clearing, you have to decline any offers that you've been made so far. And so that's a huge gamble. It's like one of those game shows. Do you want this prize, or do you want to risk it all for something potentially better?
That isn't actually the case. Yes, in order to accept a clearing offer, yes, you do have to decline any existing offers from your first or second choice institution. But in order to make a clearing phone call, just to see whether we have any spaces, just to see what the course is like, whether you might be interested in coming, you definitely don't. So don't act too hastily. Hold on to those places that you have in the bag, as it were. Make some phone calls if you are interested in trading up, if you have done better than you thought. And then if it comes to it that your clearing institution and degree program sounds so much better than the one for which you currently hold a place, then by all means go and decline your place and accept the clearing offer. But there should be no point in which you're left in that limbo where you don't actually have a place anywhere and you're unsure of what's your future's gonna look like.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, I think that's very reassuring. So I've got one more question, because I'm all about the questions. If the person you're speaking to on the phone doesn't know the answer to a question asked by a student, what sort of response would give a prospective candidate confidence that their concerns would be taken seriously if they accepted a place at the department or the school?
So could you give an example?
So for example, a question about careers, or like support. Once a student starts studying at the university, and support is provided by professional services. So for example, in the form of consultations to kind of help people with essay writing or with their language skills. For example, if a student were to say, okay, so my academic writing isn't very good, how much support can I expect to receive, once I enroll on the course?
No, I see what you mean. The first thing to say is the people working in our clearing call centre are very experienced, and they will know answers to many of these questions. They're very well briefed in advance.
Okay.
But if not, hopefully they will know somebody on the day that they can forward your phone call on to, like for example me as an expert about the programme. If that still isn't the case, if they're unsure where to go from there, I don't know about you, but I think the thing that I find most reassuring when someone doesn't know the answer is an honest, I don't know, rather than trying to bluff your way through it and sort of make up an answer. I would feel, as a nervous student on the day, I would feel most reassured by someone who says, I don't know, can I take your details, find out and get back to you, get the information from the correct individual. And so hopefully by that route you will get an answer to your question. And the sorts of things you were raising there, Tracy, are really important because they really speak to the kind of the experience a student's going to have at an institution. And as an admissions tutor, that is exactly the sort of thing we do try and convey at Clearing, that level of support that someone would receive. But if you haven't been able to get an answer to that question, hopefully within an hour or two, someone will get back to you. And please do feel free to say, oh, call me on this number, or if email is better, leave your preferred contact details, because you might be in the position where you're on the phone to a number of universities that morning. So we understand it's not always easy to get hold of you. But yeah, that would be my my sort of ideal scenario if a student question came in that the responders couldn't answer.
So vague responses of, oh, we have loads of people who could help you with your essays, probably wouldn't cut it.
No, absolutely. No, you want a level of detail on this stuff, because it's really important. It could determine whether you have a really positive experience at university or not.
Yeah, and so prospective students should take these questions quite seriously and not feel apologetic for, probing about, how long can I access support for, and how often, and those sorts of questions. I don't think anyone should feel like they're being awkward for asking them, or causing trouble to anyone, because you have to be happy with the course you're enrolled on if you're committed to it for a minimum of 3 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's often said about job interviews that you should go to a job interview as a candidate as much interviewing the employers as the other way around. And I think there is an element here of that in the clearing process. If you're armed with some grades that you're proud of, and you're making your phone calls to institutions that you're really seriously considering, it's as much about us as universities impressing you as a potential applicant as it is the other way around. So yes, please just ask as many questions as you like, and if you're not getting the detail you need, ask for more information.
And expect that response, by email or phone later on.
Absolutely.
I think that can be a good way of seeing, how invested universities are as well. So, I mean, this is a slightly different context, but when we were looking at schools for my son, I had a number of questions, and, my husband approached one of the schools, and the headmistress said, oh, you've missed open day, no problem, we'll show you around. I'll show you around personally. Whereas, with another school, I asked some questions about language teaching and stuff like that, and just never got a reply. And so, if you're in that position where you get a detailed response from one university and nothing from another one, that can also be the thing that helps you decide where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to build on that just reminded me of something that that your listeners really should be looking for as well. As we've said, if you apply for a clearing place, you may not have been to that institution on an open day or a visit day before. But if you really would like to see the campus before making a decision, then ideally you should be offered the opportunity to do that. So just at my own institution at Loughborough, for example, on the Saturday following the Thursday of A-level results day, we have a mini open day for anyone that's come through clearing, is considering Loughborough, but has never seen the campus before. And so if you think you might be able to get to that institution, perhaps with family members or what have you, to just have a look around, it won't be the grand experience you would have had on a big open day with thousands of visitors, but nevertheless, it could be crucial to helping you make that decision.
But actually, a low-key kind of mini open day could be quite good for students who are a little bit more reserved to get a bit more attention.
Absolutely.
And have a bit of thinking space to figure out what's what.
That's a really good point. And also, there will still, even though it's a quieter open day, be academic staff on hand, admission staff on hand to answer the sorts of questions that we were discussing. And so you will be able to get answers to those questions you need, even in the smaller open day.
Yeah, or even check out some of the services.
Absolutely.
Did I say I had one last question before? Because I think I lied.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
I am. I'm going to say, before we get on to your very exciting last question.
Yeah.
So if any of our listeners have questions, we would
Yes.
love to hear them. And what we can do is, let's see if Catherine will very kindly give us some support in responding to those questions. So do write in and contact us with those.
Yeah.
Also, if you found this to be a helpful podcast, please tell your friends, subscribe so you can find out about our next podcasts.
And leave us a review if you find it helpful so we can help more people.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much.
Yep. So my last question is, so assuming a student has had an offer and accepted it, and when they start on campus, having come through clearing and, like the big induction is over and things like that, what kind of support can students expect to receive to help them sort of find their way around university and get started once they are there?
So that's a really good question. And I think this applies to all students, whether they've come through clearing or not, because there may be all sorts of reasons why students who've come through the conventional UCAS route need extra support or are not aware of it yet. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Universities throw a lot of effort into the first couple of weeks of induction, and that really takes two forms: the kind of social and cultural induction to university life, which is really important, but also the academic induction, which will give you the sorts of guidance that I think you're thinking of more, Tracy, which is around study skills support and support with just navigating what university life is about. And so these might be questions actually that you want to ask on the clearing phones too. Things like, will I have a personal tutor that's there to look after my pastoral needs? And so if you're feeling particularly vulnerable or particularly concerned about anything at all, ideally you will be assigned a personal tutor. Sometimes they're called academic advisor, but in effect, they're your first port of call if you have any concerns whatsoever. And outside of the kind of academic support system, there is also a really important support community within universities that are designed to do things like help students function on a day-to-day basis in lectures and seminars, but also especially around assessments. But my advice to you would be that if you are a little bit concerned about what's expected of you on a particular course that you're studying, ask for help sooner rather than later. Don't wait until the week before your assignment's due, or even the day before your assignment's due, to express your concerns and your difficulties. Please do ask straight away. One difference you might notice between school and college and university is that at university level, we talk a lot about independent learning and independent study. And the idea there is not that we leave you on your own without any help.
Absolutely.
But rather that when you need help, you ask for it, you come to us. And so I know it can be difficult sometimes to admit you might be struggling, or you think you potentially could struggle in an area, but it's far better to put your hand up and say, yes, please, I do need some support here. Can you direct me to the correct part of the university, the correct member of staff that can help me out? And just to say as well that if you're a student who has particular learning needs that have been documented already in your educational context, then it's worth asking the university that you're applying to what they do for students like yourself who are living with your particular condition or experience your particular learning need. And it's pretty sure that they will be able to talk you through the process of getting that support you need.
I think the other thing I just add to that as well, that I've become aware of at our institution, is if you have a learning difference or a learning need that has not yet been diagnosed, it's worth kind of putting the ball in motion before you come to university, because sometimes the process for kind of getting tested and a diagnosis can take several weeks. And obviously then you might feel disadvantaged, as you're approaching your first assessment and you haven't had the diagnosis, you haven't been able to access the help that you need. It might be worth, once you've accepted the offer to start exploring the avenues for having a diagnosis, whether it's at the university or externally. So you've got the correct paperwork to access the help that you need once you are at university.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And as soon as you've accepted your place, you are then a member of the university. You then can begin to access the services like the student support services. So as Tracy says, really, really an important point. Don't feel you've got to wait till you've moved into the accommodation and it's day one of your university life. Please do get in touch with us over the late August, early September period.
And also in terms of, avoiding becoming overwhelmed when you first arrive at university, if you can do any of these things over the summer before you arrive, that's ideal.
Absolutely.
That is ideal. And as it so happens, Alex and I are running a program called Understand Uni Life, which is specifically designed to help you prepare for university after clearing, navigate the clearing process, but also kind of prepare, for the experience of moving to university and all the things you need to know before week one. Yes. So get a bit of a head start on the things you need to do so that you have the right sort of expectations, and you're in the right frame of mind to begin university when you're on campus and you're enrolled.
Yeah.
And to avoid the overwhelm.
So it covers 3 areas really. So it's living independently, so top tips and hacks for adapting to living with flatmates or on your own, or just with that level of freedom really.
Shopping, cleaning
and some fun things too.
Yes.
And the second area is top tips for making friends. Lots of people are absolutely brilliant and it comes so naturally to them, but some people like to have a couple of strategies up their sleeves. Well, what are the main ways I can get in touch with people or form links? And we'll give you some ideas for that. And the last one is learning independently, which was something that Catherine was telling us about. So we could go on forever about
We could go on for a very long time on learning independently.
But we will do so in a very involved, engaged and interesting way. We won't be talking to you about time management.
We will a little bit, but in a way that's kind of relevant.
I'm going to ban the word time management.
Yeah, okay.
No, it'll be very proactive and focused on actually applying things and getting started, as opposed to, us telling you, right, this is a calendar.
And setting unrealistic expectations. Yes. Like timetable your time rigidly every single day and stick to it, because that's not very realistic, is it?
No. So if you're interested in finding out more about this course, the link will be in the information for this podcast.
Excellent. And Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today. We definitely learned a lot, and I hope that our student listeners will learn a lot from this episode as well.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to Weird Learning with Dr. Tracy Dix and Dr. Alex Patel, with special guest, Dr. Catherine Armstrong. Music by Defect Machine from Pixabay. Produced by Kelly Costigan.